I'm so grateful to be here with you once again, Dr. Thomas Hemingway. We're going to be sharing with you all things energy today. And this topic just gets me excited because, you know, all throughout our lives, like that's the one thing that just keeps us fueled, keeps us happy, keeps us going. Like who here has ever watched a 3, 4, 5-year-old? Like they literally have a spring in their step. My daughter, for example, she's 4, my youngest. I got 6 kids, many of you guys know, and that's my secret to youth and longevity right there, is just keeping up with the 6 kids. My oldest has already graduated from high school and done a couple years of college, and my second is in college as well. But my baby is 4 years old, and she has so much stinking energy. Like literally, I was watching her the other day, and she doesn't even walk. Like everywhere she goes, she is skipping, she is bouncing. She literally has a spring in her step, and it's just incredible. And I hope at the end of this podcast, you'll have several of these takeaways that will really give you that info that you need, you know, where the so-called rubber meets the road, so you can just apply a couple of things in your life to get that energy back into your life, because we can always use a little bit more. In fact, you know, just studying this week with the Institute for Functional Medicine, IFM, I've gleaned a couple additional pearls. Most of the stuff I knew already, but you know, it's always great to get reinforced. The cool thing is there's so much new data on this topic. When I was in medical school over 20 years ago, all we sort of talked about was that super preliminary kind of superficial stuff. Was, yeah, we got these things called mitochondria. They are the powerhouses of the cell, right? That's where the energy, almost all the energy you have in your body, most of it, 90 some odd % of it, is manufactured, made, processed in these little power plants, you could call them, called the mitochondria. We knew that, and we knew what they look like on an electron microscope, the inner membrane, the folding, the cristae, the stuff that went on in there, that stuff called the Krebs cycle, that if you've been there in some kind of professional school situation, you had to memorize all the steps and how between 36 and 38 ATP are created in this process, and then the electron transport chain that occurs, and how you get this hydrogen or proton gradient, and how you get energy, right? This ADP, adenosine diphosphate, needs to be converted into ATP, adenosine triphosphate, because that's what holds the energy. It's the energy currency. It's that zap, that zest, that vitality that we all want comes from that ATP. And this all happens primarily in the mitochondria. And so wouldn't you think it would be super important to get that mitochondria really, really healthy? Like, duh, right? We got to keep the mitochondria healthy. And so to do that, we're going to get all into that today. We're going to talk about these mitochondria. We're going to talk about how we can get them healthy. And it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to share it with you, because it's really something that I've been in awe, both scientifically, how this stuff happens on the molecular level. And then now in the year 2022, there's just so much more information on this important, you know, mitochondrial health that I don't think we were really focusing on in years past. The mitochondrial health is something that we just didn't really know about as far as the specifics. You know, we knew some sort of basic health principles, which also apply to mitochondria, but there's way more specifics. And one of the first books I read on this was that cool book by, I think some of you guys may have read it. It's called Fat for Fuel. It's a great book, and it's one that I've always recommended. It's probably a decade old. But what I like about that book, Fat for Fuel, is it starts with sort of a good deep dive into mitochondria, you know, their purpose and how you can fuel them, not only efficiently, but with the stuff that actually not only gives tons of energy, and in the title, right, it kind of gives this away, Fat for Fuel. The fat actually provides way more energy, right, than carbohydrates. Rather than 4 kilocalories per gram, it's like 9, you know, double, basically, a little bit more than double the amount of energy per gram of fats, but not just any fats, right? We want healthy fats. We want the real fats that come from nature, not the stuff that man, whom maybe thought he or she was better than nature, manufactured, you know, these vegetable oils. Hey, they're plant-based, right? Vegetable oils. They're cleaner, the margarines, like all that, that's garbage, that's crap. That's not the kind of fat I'm talking about. I'm talking about avocados. I'm talking about nuts and seeds. I'm talking about the fat in well pasture raised, running around in the wild animals that have fat and grizzle. It's okay to eat that stuff, especially if they've been grass-fed and finished and eating the stuff that they're supposed to eat, not being fed with grains and oats and sprinkles, heaven forbid, but we know that that does happen, right? So Fat for Fuel, Dr. Mercola wrote this book maybe a decade ago, and he goes into how fats are a better energy source, not just because they provide more, but also, my favorite part is they burn much cleaner. So let's just think back to the days before Tesla and before electronic vehicles, before the hybrids, where we just had gasoline-powered engines, right? Most of you guys remember that. So back in those days, we burned basically gasoline for fuel. And a byproduct of that, right, we get heat, we get energy, but we also get carbon dioxide, water, and then whatever soot or crap comes out of the tailpipe, right? You put your, a white shirt or white something, at the end of that, especially if it's diesel burning a lot of sooty, you get all this black stuff, right, that comes out of the tailpipe. That's kind of we'll just call it soot or the byproduct. So when in the body, in the mitochondria, the engines also have some soot. They have some byproducts, some kind of, I don't know, we could call them toxins, or let's just call it soot that comes out, the byproducts. When we burn fat or carbohydrates or protein, we have a little bit of exhaust. Let's just call it exhaust, right? The sooty stuff that comes out. And when we burn healthy fats, right? The avocados, these nuts and seeds, and the favorite, right, of the Mediterraneans, the extra virgin, just pressed, basically nearly unprocessed, just the pressed olive oil. I have lived most of my life, almost 30 years in Hawaii, so we have lots of coconuts. We love to eat the meat out of the coconut and the coconut oils. We love macadamias, tons of fat in there, natural fat, the oil from that, and just the nuts themselves. These are the awesome, healthy, natural fats that burn in the mitochondria. The fats burn clean. They hardly have any emission. They're kind of like the Tesla in that they're basically no emission or very little emission because they burn so clean. So these are the healthy fats. That's why he entitles his book Fat for Fuel, because when you burn carbohydrates, especially the really refined, crappy ones that come in those 3 Bs that I talk about, that they come in a bag or a box or with a barcode, anything that's highly refined, processed grain, sugar, or these carbs, they burn actually really dirty. Imagine their exhaust looks more like the exhaust that comes out of the tailpipe of a diesel. Real sooty, real black, real just kind of heavy. Lots of exhaust coming out of these poor quality foods. What I like to call humbly food-like substances, because honestly, it's not real food, right? I mean, you look at the label, there might be 50 ingredients, maybe 45 of them. You don't know what they are. They sound like they should be in a chemistry lab. Well, I'm telling you, they probably should not be in your mouth or your stomach or in your intestines or anywhere in your body, because when you eat all that garbage, you will feel it the next day. I know I do. Once in a while, I'll be honest, I might have an Oreo cookie once a month or something, or whatever, like if it was crushed on my favorite type of ice cream or something like that, I might do that a couple times a year, and I feel it the next day. My joints hurt, I'm achy. Well, what is that? That is inflammation. Inflammation, it's my body telling me something that, hey, that stuff that you ate, yesterday, that bowl of ice cream you had in the evening, had some Oreo cookies crushed on top, that ain't good for you. It burned dirty, right? Lots of exhaust, lots of what we call reactive oxygen species. These are the ROS, the reactive oxygen. These are those free radicals, as we call them in the body, that are very damaging. Why are they damaging? Because they are super, super inflammatory. Because they basically are missing an electron, they can bind to almost anything and cause lots of havoc, lots of damage, lots of inflammation, right? And that's why we want to eat things that have antioxidants to help protect us, because those are electron donors. And not to get too sciencey, but basically they can give an electron to these free radicals and make them kind of stable so that they're not so reactive and they don't cause so much inflammation. Now, what I'm not saying here is that eat all the Oreos you want as long as you have a bunch of berries and healthy, cruciferous vegetables, right? Like broccoli and Brussels sprouts. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying eat garbage and then sort of chase it with, a cup of broccoli. I'm not saying that. I'm saying primarily eat the real whole foods, at least 80, 85, 90% of your diet And if you want to have an Oreo once a month or rarely or once a week or whatever, just try to keep that to a minimum. And you know what I found is that I honestly don't even crave these kind of highly processed foods anymore. Like I still have a liking, the taste for like ice cream, for example, I still like, but I almost never crave it because I've changed my diet overall, and my gut, you know, is healthy. The microbiota living in my intestinal tract is healthy, and it actually craves the good stuff. It wants the Brussels sprouts. It wants the, you know, the cauliflower and the broccoli sprouts and the asparagus, and it wants these things. And so that's actually what I crave. And so over time, your cravings will change. But what I was getting at here is that when we eat these highly processed, especially the carbohydrates, especially fructose, and gosh, one of these, please eliminate things from the diet right here. Write it down, put it on your list. Don't eat anything with high fructose corn syrup. I've mentioned this before, and I did a whole podcast talking about this in liver disease, the new most common reason for liver transplant, which is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is essentially a problem of eating too much sugar and the highly processed sugars like the high fructose corn syrup. In fact, I wanted to share with you a study that was done. This was one of the original ones. This is several years old, but it looked at fructose in diets and how it damaged the mitochondria. And this was published in Nutrients in 2017. Fructose-rich diets affect mitochondrial DNA and repair in rats. So this was a rat study, but hey, they got to start somewhere, right? And they're an easy subject. And 2017, there's been additional ones, but this is one of the hallmark ones that came out that showed that not only did this stuff cause fatty liver disease, especially affected the liver, but it affected, the way that it did that was it affected the mitochondria. The mitochondria are so critical. Remember, they produced all the energy, basically the majority of the energy in the body, the powerhouse, the power plant of the cell, the mitochondria. Well, it damaged not only the mitochondria itself, their functioning, caused more inflammation, but it also damaged the DNA and the ability to repair that DNA. And so not only did it make them, the mitochondria, those powerhouses, not function properly, but it inhibited their ability to be able to regenerate. And that's really important because one of the reasons, like say, for example, my young daughter, who if you're watching the YouTube, you might have seen her, she just walked in and out and she was bouncing around. She has more mitochondria per overall body mass than I do, because at a younger age, you just have more mitochondria. And as you age, the mitochondrial numbers go down. Most of it's our fault. It's because of what we do. It's because of our crappy diet and our maybe not so awesome lifestyle choices that come up over the years. But in young kids, one of the reasons they're bouncing around with so much energy is because they have more mitochondria sort of per body mass, as well as better functioning mitochondria. It works better. They have less inflammation, less damage, because I got nearly 50 years of damage on mine, whatever I've done over the years, whether it be through diet or lack of a healthy behavior. Like for me, many years, my sort of Achilles heel of health was my lack of sleep. I just didn't sleep much. Now I'm bouncing off the walls and I'm more energized than ever, but I'm sleeping 7 and often 8 hours a night. And I cherish that and I love that. And that's also, just as an aside, it's interesting, this conference I'm attending, they're really targeting sleep. And we're talking all about energy production, mitochondrial health, getting these powerhouses as healthy as possible. And one of the biggest ways and most, I would say, simple and efficient ways is just getting high quality sleep each and every night, or most nights, 7 or 8 hours of sleep. Restful, rejuvenative, quality sleep every night is really a great way to increase your mitochondrial health and get more energy. So mitochondrial health is directly related to our sleep. In fact, I would say humbly that through my experience, sleep, both in myself and in thousands and thousands of patients that I've seen, when I actually get the history and we talk about sleep and how their sleep is, their sleep, the quality of that is usually in part a reflection of their overall health. So if somebody is sleeping really poorly, and although their diet may be decent, they may be doing some exercise, they're still not as healthy as they could be because they're missing that important step to not only improve their overall health, but really their mitochondrial health. And mitochondrial health is so important because that helps us to have the energy to do all the other stuff, right? If we feel like we don't have any energy. We wake up in the morning like we're not going to want to do any exercise if we have no energy. And if we don't have healthy mitochondria, we just feel like we don't have any energy. You've heard of chronic fatigue syndrome, right? Fibromyalgia, all these chronic conditions. A big part of that is lack of energy, which is basically mitochondrial health that has depreciated, or mitochondrial health that is waning, that's not as healthy as it needs to be. And also the numbers of mitochondria will be down. So today we're going to be talking about not only how to get the mitochondria we've got healthy, but how to actually increase the number of mitochondria, because we can actually do that. Believe it or not, we can, even as we're getting older, increase our numbers of mitochondria. And there's a couple of real simple ways to be able to do that, and we're going to get into that. But the reason I want to put so much emphasis on this is the mitochondria is what keeps us alive, right? It produces the energy that we need each and every day, all throughout the day. And if our mitochondria are not healthy, this is part of that root of most, if not all, of those inflammatory diseases out there, right? The base problem with all these illnesses is inflammation. I did an entire podcast, maybe 2 or 3, talking deeply about inflammation, because it's at the heart of all of those conditions that plague us and that kill us, right? Number 1 killer worldwide is heart disease. And it primarily at its root, it's an inflammatory disease, right? The blood vessels get inflammation, the walls get scarred, they get narrowed, and they block the flow to the brain. You get a stroke. To the heart, you get a heart attack. To the kidneys, you get kidney disease, right? All of these issues are inflammatory. All of the rheumatologic conditions, think about rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Sjogren's, even many autoimmune conditions, Hashimoto's, for example, are caused by inflammation, right? It's a thyroiditis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is inflammation of the thyroid. So at the root of nearly all chronic disease, from heart disease, even diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, which is basically 100% preventable and treatable, and I never heard this in medical school, and curable. Type 2 diabetes is potentially curable. Isn't that awesome? Like, how powerful is that to know? Because almost 1 in 2 Americans, nearly 50% of us, the most recent statistic I just got today was like 40-something% of us in the US have either diabetes or near or pre-diabetes. Like almost 50% of us, almost 1 in 2 people. This is crazy. And type 2 diabetes is nearly all preventable, but it's also curable. And we'll talk about that a little bit here. And part of the issue rests in the mitochondria. And what happens there with respect to diabetes is typically there's too much glucose or carbohydrate consumption, and it's usually in the form of highly processed foods. In fact, a recent study from 2019 showed that in the US, our diet on average consists of not just processed food, but highly processed food in the range of about 50% of our diet. So this is stuff that comes in a bag, a box, with a barcode, tons of ingredients, and it involves lots of processed grains, flours, you know, these crappy sugars and carbs and high fructose corn syrup, and all this stuff composes standard American diet, which is the SAD diet. Nearly 50% of that is in highly processed carbohydrates. It's astounding, it's super sad, but we can change that. We can change that. And if we do, we can get our mitochondria more healthy. We can get more of them as well. And we can get more energy. So not surprisingly that at the root of basically every disease is inflammation. And inflammation not only is at the root there, but it's at the root of the mitochondrial dysfunction that occurs when we can't produce the amount of energy that we need or we want, because of that same inflammation that's occurring at the level of mitochondria, happening because of our food choices. Like 2019, a study came out and it basically showed that, I forget, 11 million, it might have been more, but roughly 11 million people die per year based on poor food choices. Like literally when you see the effects of poor food choices and all the chronic diseases that they either help cause or exacerbate, it's basically the #1 cause of death, poor food choices. Like it's that important. Think about that for a second. Food choices, your food choices. But the flip side, I always like to think of the glass as half full. The cool part is we have the ability to change that. Only we get to decide what lands at the tip of our fork or in our mouth. We get to decide that each and every day. And for me, it's one of my favorite parts of the day. I love to eat. I've always been described as a good eater. And so if you've ever sat down to dinner with me, like, I'm eating what's on my plate. If you guys can't finish your food, I'll eat that too. Like, I'm a great eater, and especially if it's whole, real, fresh foods, like, oh my gosh, I am just grinding. That's what we say in Hawaii. We just grind, the killer grinds, because it just tastes so dang good. And for me, it's that stuff from the field, the natural stuff, the real stuff, the stuff without the 3 Bs, right? Without the bag, the box, or a barcode. And as we choose to eat these real foods, our mitochondria will be more healthy. So that study I mentioned about the fructose in the rats, that actually came out of Italy. And they were on a 30% fructose diet. And here in the US, I would say we have probably more of that happening, more than 30%, right? Because if you look at all the highly refined stuff that we're eating that makes up almost 50% of our diet, almost all of it's going to have some form of fructose or high fructose corn syrup, which is even worse, even worse. And so we got to eliminate, put that on your list, like I mentioned, eliminate altogether high fructose corn syrup. Like, don't buy any product that has that. These are actually more common than you would think. Like, even in some stuff that you would never think even possible, they'll sneak it in there. You know, these so-called healthy bars will have corn syrup. Or my favorite is like, well, I don't remember the name of it. I think it used to be called Log Cabin or Aunt Jemima or something, I forget. But the number one ingredient, even now on the bottle, or it might be number 2, I forget, but it says on the bottle, no high fructose corn syrup. And then the number 1 or 2 ingredient is, guess what? Corn syrup. So like, don't buy that crap. Buy the pure, if you want to buy syrup at all, buy the pure maple syrup that's just natural, comes off the tree, right? The Canadians know how to do that. You kind of slice the tree a certain way and it just drips into there, pure maple syrup, or honey, natural honey. I personally kind of like honey, and I like that it not only is sweet, but it has also a lot of cool stuff. Like those bees. Have you guys ever seen the Bee Movie? Like, shout out to the Bee Movie. That's one of my kids' favorites. It's actually really true how important bees are. Like, we don't think about it. We don't give them thanks enough for what they do. But like the pollination that occurs, like the cross-pollination and whatnot, like literally it's responsible for the majority of our food. And without bees, like we'd be dead. We need our bees. But the other cool part besides the pollination is like the honey. Like honey is awesome because it's sweet, it's natural, and it has a bunch of nutrients too, depending on where these bees have gone and what plants they've been on and all this kind of stuff. There's lots of nutrients associated with honey as well. And it makes a good natural antiseptic, right? If you get a cut and you put, instead of the really, you know, super chemical derived ointments that are out there like Neosporin, like please never buy that. I don't know if I just said that, but don't buy. Because a lot of people actually have an allergy to the neomycin in there, and it's just really harsh, really kind of toxic, really harsh. Well, just, you could put potentially some honey on there. There's actually a lot of bactericidal and bacteriostatic, which means it kind of prevents bacteria, just in the qualities of honey. I learned this as a kid. Like my dad, it was amazing. Like, I don't consider him, you know, the healthiest guy in the world, but he had some pretty healthy stuff that he taught me. One was exercise. I love to exercise, and he loved to play basketball with us. We'd jump on the trampoline together. He didn't surf, so I can't credit him with my surfing, but one of the things that he did, my brother burned his hands really bad as a kid, and he put honey all over it. And to this day, like, it's amazing. He had 3rd-degree burns all over both hands. They were really bad, and it literally, it almost healed with no scars, which is almost unheard of, because it didn't get infected, and he got honey slathered all over it. Like, that was our ointment that we used. We didn't use Neosporin, neomycin, bacitracin. Like, we didn't use any of those things. We just used honey. Worked phenomenally. Anyway, ask your doctor about it, or do some research on your own about it. But I digress. But honey is awesome. I love honey. I don't drink it out of the bottle or anything. You know, just a little dab will do you kind of thing. But it's super, it's one of my favorite sweeteners. I got to be honest. I love just the natural stuff. I try to stay away from anything that sounds like a chemical, like certainly the aspartames and the NutraSweets, the sucralose, all that kind of stuff. 100% these artificial ones I stay away from. But there's some other kind of sneaky ones, the sugar alcohols that I don't think they're totally awesome. I'd rather have something that's just real, right? Like honey or monk fruit, or for example, even just the leaf of the stevia plant, super, super sweet. Like I prefer those three over some others. But anyway, that's not only because I like the taste, but because they don't mess with my gut. And your gut is so important to your overall health. I would also say that in my experience, the health of the gut, like sleep, the health of your sleep and your sleep habits and your sleep is sort of an indicator of your overall health. Well, gut health, in my experience, is that way too. Like the health of one's gut, it plays into every aspect of their health. So let's talk more about some of the things we can do to help our mitochondria. So we've talked about some of the things that hurt it, crappy food selection, especially the highly processed stuff, the sugars, the fructose, the high fructose corn syrup we're going to try to avoid. But also if we just eat too much, eating too much, just higher calories than we really need. It's been shown actually in the last 20, 30 years since the induction of all of these highly available processed foods that now compose of almost 50% of our diet, that we on average eat 500 to 600 more calories per day than I did as a kid growing up. And I'll be honest, like we hardly had anything that came in a bag. Like I would go to school and I was embarrassed because I didn't have the Cheetos or the Doritos or the fruit leathers or fruit snacks or whatever we had available in those days. I always had, every day my lunch was pretty boring. It was a tuna fish sandwich on some kind of a wheat bread and an apple or some kind of a piece of fruit. Like that was my lunch every single day. And I literally, it kind of makes me sad thinking about it. Like I have these memories as a kid, I would hold, and this is legit, and I don't think I've ever told this story. I would hold my bag underneath the table because I just was embarrassed to show what I had in my lunch. And honestly, I was eating the healthiest of all the kids, but you know, you always want what you don't have, right? My friends were eating the juice boxes with the 0% juice in the juice, and they had the chips and Cheetos and Oreos and fruit snacks, fruit leather, whatever. And what I had a tuna fish sandwich and an apple. And I was better for it. And I bless my mom's heart for looking out for me that way. But it was actually, and people say it's too expensive to eat healthy. She told me it was actually cheaper to eat that way. I come from a family of 6 kids. My wife and I have 6 kids. I don't know, it wasn't planned that way, but hey, just went down that way and we love it. It's amazing. But she told me that it was cheaper to feed us that way than to buy all these different snack foods and whatever else. And so it can be done. It could be done then. It still can be done now, but it requires a little bit of preparation. I talked about this in a previous podcast, how to eat healthy on a budget. It can be done, but you have to do a little planning. You got to plan out your meals a little bit, decide ahead of time so your food doesn't go bad. You know, go to ewg.org so you can figure out which are the dirty fruits, right? The dirty dozen and stuff that you don't want to buy non-organic. And then the ones that the clean 15, I forget what they call it, clean 15 or something, where it's the fruits, vegetables that it's okay to buy non-organic because you're not eating the skin anyway, right? Like an avocado, you're not going to eat the skin, or an orange, or you know, that kind of thing that comes with a shell. You're not eating that, so you can afford to not do organic. But if it's a berry, heaven forbid, strawberries, raspberries, like these are literally coated with pesticides, super high levels of pesticides. I think among the highest of anything in the whole EWG's research, that's the Environmental Working Group. I think it was strawberries or raspberries. One of the berries had the highest level of pesticides when they were non-organic. So if you're gonna get berries, which I love, 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 I only buy organic berries. And if they don't have organic, I just don't buy the berries. I'm not convinced that I can get that crap off with washing and things like that. So anyway, I digress again, but eat real food, avoid overeating, because when you overeat, that taxes your mitochondria and also causes more inflammation. So it damages the mitochondria, it causes more inflammation, and it decreases the production of new mitochondria. And this was kind of one of the cool things we were talking about this week in this IFM, or Institute for Functional Medicine course on energy. It's called Bioenergetics. And talking all about mitochondria really is that when you eat too much, not only do you cause inflammation, but you actually decrease the production, which this PGC1 alpha, that has a lot to do with the production of more mitochondria. It's decreased when you overeat. And when you eat too many carbohydrates and fructose, we talked about that already, refined carbs, decreases that. But when you eat less, either in the form of some sort of caloric restriction that's been shown to have longevity benefits. Or what I just do, I don't really focus on the restriction part. I focus on narrowing the window a little bit. I do a little bit of an intermittent fast most days per week. Every day I do about a 12-hour. That's even on the weekends. But on the other days, I do somewhere between 13 and 16 hours, like 5 days a week. And then I still eat the same amount of calories that I would normally eat, but I just do it in a narrower window, say 8 to 9 hours. I'm eating all my 2 or 3 meals and snacks included in that time frame. And that's been shown also to improve mitochondrial health. So in other words, it decreases inflammation and also increases what we were just talking about, the PGC1 alpha, which increases the growth of new mitochondria. You can actually grow new mitochondria. So quick way to do it is just narrowing the window a little bit. And you got to experiment with this. I've done a few podcasts on intermittent fasting. Everybody's a little bit different, especially the ladies out there. I feel like really don't push it as hard. Like some people want this merit badge, like, oh, I eat all my food in 4 hours. Or some people now, they do the OMAD diet, right? The 1 meal a day diet. And I'm just not quite convinced that that's the right way to eat for everybody. I think we're all different. So pick what works for you. I've just decided that in my personal experience and with many others that I've worked with, most people can tolerate a 12-hour overnight fast with basically no significant bad side effects. Obviously, talk it over with your doctor, your healthcare provider. If you are a diabetic already on insulin, you're going to have to be cognizant of that. And so definitely discuss this with your healthcare provider. And of course, as always, nothing that I'm talking about doing or sharing is medical advice. This is just helpful information. It's education and entertainment. So definitely discuss with your provider. But what I found is that most of us can do a 12-hour overnight, what I call a circadian fast, because we weren't designed to eat all night anyway, right? We came from thousands of years of ancestry, literally millennia, where we never ate overnight because there just wasn't any food laying around. There wasn't a pantry. There wasn't a convenience store. There wasn't anything open at night, and we couldn't store our food overnight because some other scavenger would come and get it from us. And so we didn't really have anything sitting around, right? We'd get up in the morning and then take us a couple hours to find our next meal. So we were naturally doing this pattern of a intermittent fasting, or what's really called the time-restricted feeding, for millennia. And then it changed with the advent of convenience stores and snack foods, really. Because when I was a kid, I did it too without even knowing it. We didn't even have a word for it back then. We did like a 14-hour overnight fast because that's just what we did. We didn't snack, and the kitchen was closed every night at about 5 p.m. after dinner. And that was it. Didn't open again until 7 or so in the morning the next day. So it was a 14-hour window I did, and I didn't have any idea that I was even doing it. It was just the way that we lived. So narrowing the window of feeding, that time-restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, actually helps improve the mitochondria that you've got, and also increases the production of new mitochondria. Like I said, this PGC1 alpha goes up with intermittent fasting and with caloric restriction, because it's saying, hey, I'm not being bombarded all day long with food substrate. I need to produce more mitochondria, so when I do get that food substrate, I'm ready and I can pump out the energy that we need. And so it actually increases the number of mitochondria. So the biogenesis of new mitochondria happens when we do these healthy practices like time-restricted feeding, caloric restriction to some degree, and just eating the real food, right? Limiting the ones that aren't good, the highly processed grains, flours, carbs, especially the fructose and the high fructose corn syrup. We've talked about that ad nauseum. So throw that stuff away. And then quality foods also will help. These are the stuff that we talked about at the beginning, like from Dr. Mercola's book, right? The healthy fats, also the healthy proteins, the grass-fed, pasture-raised beefs and chickens and whatever you guys like to eat for your meat. For me, I love wild-caught salmon and ahi and all the good stuff that comes here in Hawaii named mahi-mahi that they can all get locally. I love that stuff. And that is also a great source of energy for the mitochondria. Eggs as well. Eggs are some of my favorite. I literally think eggs are kind of like the natural superfood, right? Like if there's a superfood for an animal food, it's going to be a steak and eggs. Like that's, right? Steak and eggs. Isn't that amazing? Like that's literally an animal superfood. For plants, there's lots of cool superfoods, and we'll talk a little bit about some of them today, which include like the berries that we've already talked about, because they have tons of antioxidants, like that fancy stuff called resveratrol that people are now trying to manufacture in a supplement and get us to buy it, because of the books that have been written on its longevity. help and things like that. Thank you, David Sinclair. You're amazing. But, you don't have to buy the resveratrol from David Sinclair or from some other place on Amazon. Like, just eat the berries, right? Like, you don't have to buy the supplement, just eat the berries. So the other cool thing, they have the right kinds of proteins, right? They have the L-carnitine, which is helpful for the mitochondria, that comes in meat. Omega-3s, come in the fish, salmon, mackerel, tuna. We talked about the berries that have the resveratrol. Also, one of my favorites, dark chocolate too has these antioxidants. So dark chocolate can be included there. Alpha lipoic acid is also great for mitochondrial health, and this can come from the dark leafy greens, right? The kale and the spinach and this kind of stuff. I love the Brussels and the asparagus. Alpha lipoic acid is amazing. I actually started a couple years back taking a supplement that has alpha lipoic acid because of this mitochondrial benefit. And my wife will tell you, like, holy crap, like, we're never going back. We feel so good, like, with enhanced energy and enhanced gut health. And I mean, we're bouncing off the walls. And I know right now she's in a stage of her life. She just launched a new website. Shout out to my wife, Brooke. She's amazing, doing so much stuff, but it's like she's go, go, go. And she's doing it, and she's able to do it because of this improved mitochondrial function, improved gut health that she's experiencing from both the supplements she takes that have alpha lipoic acid, as well as her dietary habits, which her favorite one ever and lifestyle habit is exercise. So we're going to get into that because not only it's one of my favorites, like exercise is one of the things for me in my life that it literally on a dime can not only change my mindset, my energy, my approach, my emotion. I think Tony Robbins is quoted as saying the quality of your life depends on the quality of your emotions. And literally the quickest way that I know of to change your emotion is to do some exercise. Like if you're feeling down, you're feeling crappy, like that day back in November last year where I literally lost my entire book manuscript. I mean, I wanted to scream 4-letter obscenities ad nauseum, and I decided, you know what? I'm gonna take a couple deep breaths of air. I went outside for like 15 minutes, and I was in Florida at the time, and the waves were tiny, but I went out and surfed for like 10 or 15 minutes, caught a couple of waves, and I came back after having done some exercise, had some outdoor, nature exposure, vitamin N, as I like to call it, right? I got my movement, my N, my nature, a little bit of vitamin D, and I got some movement, just exercise in, and that literally changed my whole approach. That mechanism of exercise or movement is one of the best things for your mitochondria. And to the person who doesn't understand mitochondria, doesn't understand energy, it appears at superficial level to defy the law of physics. It does not defy a law of physics. Okay, the law of physics says that matter cannot be, or energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Or matter cannot be, can only change forms, right? That's how it goes. Can only change forms. And so what happens is people think, well, if I'm tired, why the heck would I want to exercise? Because that'll use up my energy. Then I'll have even less energy. Well, actually, in humans, it doesn't work that way. And the law of energy and mass and conservation of matter is still happening, but we just need to look at the whole big picture, right? And what happens in the body is that when we exercise, our mitochondria are like, they're clapping, right? They're going bananas. They love it. They love it when we're exercising because they get excited. And when they see that we are doing exercise, not only do they function better and burn cleaner and more efficiently, but they also get stimulated. They get that PGC1 alpha going, which tells them to make more mitochondria. So they make more of it. They use better and more efficiently the mitochondria that you've got, produce more energy, and then they make even more mitochondria. So one of the best stimulants to produce more energy, to produce more of these power plants, these powerhouses of the cell, is actually exercise. So that's how the magic happens. That's why you feel so much more enthused, energized. Obviously, the blood flow increases and all that. The oxygen delivery to the brain, the heart, all the places you need it goes up as well. But what's happening long term, the reason why you can do exercise and then do more of it is because you're actually producing more mitochondria. And this can happen through really any kind of exercise. Nowadays, we're looking more at the strength training or the resistance training because not only does that help spike the increase in mitochondrial production, but also in muscle, right? And the more muscle mass you have, that's going to be better for your metabolism, right? The muscle is so highly dense energetically, that you can burn more calories there than any other tissue in the body. So it's important. The more muscle we have, it's been shown basically to help us be healthier, especially as we age. And the quicker we lose our muscle as we age, the quicker our health declines. So it's so important to increase, maintain, and not lose muscle as we age, right? The curse of sarcopenia, I've talked about it many times, is that we lose muscle mass as we age if we don't do anything. And that's not good. And in fact, that's the other reason that you may or may not have seen her, but my daughter bounces around, has energy and zip and zap in her step because she is always moving. Like, we often like to blame our metabolism and say, oh, you know, I'm 40 now, I'm 30 now, I'm 50 now, I'm 60 now. My metabolism just doesn't work well. Well, actually, the data says, sorry, right? It's going to do this. The data does not agree with you there. Your metabolism does not significantly slow down until well after 60 years of age. The person that slows down, are you ready for it? The person that slows down is you. You slow down, I slow down. That's the reason our metabolism isn't the same as when we were 4, like my little daughter here that was running around, because we have changed. Our metabolism has not changed appreciably, at least over the first 60 years of life. And that's been published. That's the most recent data out there. We can't blame our metabolism, at least until we're 60. Then after that, maybe it declines a little, but not a lot. And so the way that we can pep that up is with increasing our muscle mass, increasing our movement, increasing our resistance training, right? Look what I got here. Like literally no joke. I'm almost tripping over them. I have like 5 different weights at the base of my standing desk. I'm standing right now doing this podcast. I'm lifting weights, moving around, because when I do that, you guys are laughing at me on YouTube. I feel better. I feel more energized, but also it increases my energy. It increases my mitochondria because of this PGC1 alpha. I grow more mitochondria. My mitochondria work better. I get more of them. I get more muscle mass. It's a win, 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 win. Also, heat and cold, right? You guys have heard of the cold plunge and the sauna. They're both really good for helping grow more mitochondria and making it more efficient, right? There's this whole oxidative phosphorylation process that gets better through heat, through sauna. And right now, I feel like I'm living in a sauna all day long in Hawaii. This winter coming up, I'm gonna be spending most of my time probably in Utah because I don't know if you guys have heard, but both my mom and my stepmom have been recently diagnosed with bad cancer, metastatic cancer. And so I'm gonna be there closer to them for the next couple of months. And over there, I'll have access over the winter to some cold therapy, right? It gets cold in Utah. There's mountains there and it gets freezing every night. So I'll have some cold options available. Also where we stay there, we have a hot tub. So I get my hot therapy. In Hawaii, I don't have a hot tub or a cold plunge, but I do have, 80 plus degrees every day that I'm here. So that's kind of my heat. It's pretty easy to overheat here. And occasionally I'll do often just a cold shower, as cold as it'll get, which is not super cold, but I gotta improvise a little bit, right? So sauna is great as well. Cold plunge or cryo ice, making your own ice bath. That actually is good for this PGC1 alpha. It increases the growth. That's the signal to increase the growth of the mitochondria as well. Also, the stuff that I love to talk about, I've done several podcasts on it, just stress optimization, being able to take a deep breath and be able to change our mindset, our energy, doing those techniques like meditation. And for me, guys, you guys know me, I'm so like bouncing off the walls active. I can hardly sit still for 30 minutes to do meditation, but I do it in shorter bursts. I do it for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. I rarely do 30 minutes or more. I haven't felt like I could really incorporate that into my life at this point with the 6 kids and all the different work that I'm doing and whatnot. I haven't done significant meditation at longer intervals, but I do shorter intervals, and it's amazing. I do longer intervals maybe while I'm surfing and just really focusing on nature and breathing and that sort of thing. But whatever you can do, 5 minutes has even been shown to be helpful. Whatever helps you to get a good grounding of yourself and your emotions through, whether it be meditation, whether it be gratitude, whether it be just breathing exercises, right? Whatever it is, for me, I do all of the above out in nature. I can't help myself. I love to be outside. And so getting our stress hormones under control and balanced and releasing the good anti-stress hormones like oxytocin, which I've talked a lot about in the past, through cuddling of your favorite canine or feline friend, or another human, right? A family member, a friend, a spouse, a kid. And I love to get hugs, and so that I know by the science increases my oxytocin, and that's like the best anti-stress hormone out there. The other thing, which we've already talked about a bit, I'm not going to belabor it now, but one of the final things that really helps mitochondrial health is just our sleep, right? I talked about that towards the beginning because I really feel like our sleep is a reflection of our total overall body health. And so getting that 7 or 8 hours of quality sleep is crucial. It actually protects the brain, right? We need that time to flush out all the byproducts of the day, right? The amyloid that might build up, the tau protein that might build up, whatever toxins that we might have been exposed to, we need to take out the trash and do the flush. And that essentially only happens while we sleep. So thank you, Dr. Jeffrey Iliff and Nattergaard from University of Rochester, who came out with that discovery 2012, 10 years ago exactly, which has been earth-shattering for me because I never learned why we needed to sleep in medical school. We didn't really know that. We knew what happened when you didn't sleep, but we didn't really know why you needed to. Now we do, and I love and cherish and value my sleep way more than I ever did. And one of the reasons is I just feel so dang good, right? Because my mitochondria, they can rejuvenate, refresh, replenish, and grow at night while we sleep, and all the trash can get taken out, which is so dang important. So at the end of the day, the principles of mitochondrial health are really like the principles of overall health. We've talked about them, right? Getting our food dialed in, eating real food, avoiding the crap that we talked about, the highly processed grains, flour, sugars, fructose, and of course the seed oils. I talk about them ad nauseum. Avoid them. Avoid the toxins out there in our environment. We didn't really focus on that too much on this podcast, but I've done others. But we are exposed every day to a ton of toxins without even thinking of it in our food primarily, but also through the EMFs that we're exposed to. If we're walking around with AirPods all the time, or we never turn our phone on airplane mode, or we never turn it off while we sleep, we're getting extra EMF radiation. A lot of the water that we drink, like you can actually find out what the water quality is like where you live. I tend to use one of those Berkey filters also, even though living in Hawaii, living in Utah, Florida, we actually have some pretty good local water, but I still like to make sure I use one of those Berkey filters. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I found that I just value what goes into my body, and I want to make sure it's clean and it's natural and it's free of toxins. So paying attention to the toxins, I don't like to touch those receipts at the grocery store. And if I do, I try not to touch the ink because that stuff has not phyto, but the sort of estrogen-like compounds that can be affecting our hormones, right? They can disrupt hormone. The endocrine disruptors, they're found all over. They're found in plastics and BPA and those receipts from the grocery store. Most time I just say, please just keep the receipt. I don't need it. That kind of thing, because the toxins are all around us. So if we can avoid them, also the heavy metals, a lot of people don't talk about that, but heavy metals, I got to watch out for that because I love to eat fish. So I only eat wild caught, and I only eat, a couple times a year when I'm in Hawaii, I eat fish. When I'm elsewhere, I really don't eat fish. So that's kind of how I regulate. The hormesis activities that we talked about, right? The stresses of the body that are good, like exercise, resistance training, hot and cold therapies. Those are all really good at boosting your mitochondria, both its activity, efficiency, and growing new mitochondria. Yes, I've said that a bunch of times in this podcast. You can grow new mitochondria. It's amazing. Also through intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding, some caloric restriction as well. And my favorite, of course, is exercise. I can't get enough exercise. I don't go crazy. I do some interval stuff. My wife kind of crushes me at that. I'll be honest. She loves Orange Theory, and I'll go with her when I can. And that's like interval training from, Hades. That stuff is gnarly and I love it. I do it, but it's not my favorite. I'll just be honest. I'd rather go surfing or skiing or snowboarding or mountain biking or heck, I just love to do some pull-ups, and I love just body weight resistance stuff. There's so many of those things you can do at home without a gym. Like I can just do air squats here. I can do burpees. I can do, my favorite is the plank, do that a few times a day. Like these things are just body weight exercises that we can all do. And guess what? You can grow more mitochondria doing it. Who knew, right? So these simple daily things, starting with the most simple, what ends up in our mouth and in our body, what's on the tip of our fork, super important. Pay attention to that. Eat real food. Get your daily movement in. Get adequate sleep. Get it done. Get that awesome sleep. I love to talk about sleep. I hardly talked about it all this podcast, but I did a couple right before because sleep is so paramount, so important, and I ignored it for many years, but I now have repented. I love the value of it, and I just love, love, love to talk about it. So do these things and avoid the crap, avoid the toxins, and you're going to be so energized, so pumped up. You're going to be starting to bounce around here just like I'm doing right now, and that I'm trying to follow the example of my little 4-year-old. So until next time, guys, a big aloha.